Ever had that moment, where you're like really relying on something to work? Like your car's got to start on a freezing morning, or your phone's about to die right as you're getting that perfect sunset pic.
Oh.
Or maybe your coffee maker just refuses to cooperate when you need caffeine the most.
Oh, tell me about it. We've all been there. It's the worst.
The worst. And it feels like the universe is playing a prank, right? But imagine that feeling, but instead of a mist latte, it's a whole factory grinding to a halt because a crucial machine decided to take a nap.
Now, those are some high stakes.
Exactly. And that brings us to today's deep dive. The world of total productive maintenance, TPM for short.
Uh, Music to my ears. We're cracking open chapter 7 of this industrial management textbook I've got here, and it's all about introducing and institutionalizing TPM.
Catchy title.
Right. Though, don't let it fool you. The stuff in here is anything BUT dry.
All right, you've piqued my interest. So what is TPM? Break it down for us.
In the simplest terms, it's about squeezing every last drop of efficiency out of your equipment. We're talking like aiming for that magical 100% effectiveness.
Hold on, 100%. As in, nothing ever breaks down.
That's the dream. Zero breakdowns, zero slowdowns, everything humming along perfectly.
Okay, got to call a timeout here because 100% efficiency just made my brain do a backflip. Is that even possible in the real world?
It's definitely ambitious, and this chapter doesn't sugarcoat it. It's not a quick fix, more like a complete shift in thinking. You see, TPM isn't really about the machines themselves. It's about building a culture where everyone feels responsible for keeping those machines running.
So it's like everyone from the CEO down to the person on the factory floor needs to be on board.
You got it. Teamwork, shared goals, everyone understanding how each piece of the puzzle matters. The chapter actually points out that one of the biggest mistakes companies make is not getting that top-down buy-in.
Interesting. So how do you create that buy-in?
They even suggest throwing a big ol' kickoff shindig to get everyone pumped about TPM and then keep that momentum going with constant communication.
Keep the energy high. I like it.
Exactly. And to make sure all this effort is actually working, you need ways to measure it. That's where KPIs come in, key performance indicators. They're like your report card for TPM.
Got it. KPIs. So we're not just slapping a fresh coat of paint on the problem here. We're talking about a whole culture shift. Okay, so I'm starting to see how TPM is kind of like less about putting out fires and more about making sure those fires never even start.
You got it. And this chapter actually lays out a whole roadmap for how to do that. They even have this flowchart, figure 7.1, that maps out the whole journey.
A roadmap, huh? Love it when they make it practical like that.
Right. It shows that TPM isn't just a one-time makeover for your factory. It's about making continuous improvement part of your company's DNA.
Music to my ears. But where do you actually begin? How do you take this big, ambitious idea and put it into action?
Well, the chapter breaks it down into 4 main areas, and they all kind of build on each other. First up, and I think this is crucial, is understanding the why. Why is TPM so important in the first place? Because, let's face it, change is a lot easier when you're motivated.
100%. Give me those motivating factors. Why is TPM so critical?
At its core, it's all about reducing losses. And I'm not just talking about those catastrophic equipment meltdowns, but any little hiccup that throws a wrench in your efficiency. They even get into the nitty-gritty of how to calculate what they call performance losses.
Performance losses. Sounds a bit ominous, doesn't it?
It kind of is. Think of it like this. Imagine a slow leak in a pipe, right? Ignore it for too long and you've got a flooded basement. It's the same idea with equipment. Even small inefficiencies, if you let them slide, can add up to big problems.
Okay, point taken. Small leaks, bad news.
Exactly. In fact, the chapter gave this great example of a bottling plant that was losing thousands of dollars every single day because their conveyor belt was running just a tad slower than it should have been.
No major breakdown, just a bit slow.
Exactly. But those seconds added up.
Wow, that really puts things into perspective. So once you've convinced everyone that even small inefficiencies matter, what's next?
Then it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of equipment maintenance. And this chapter doesn't disappoint. They've got tons of practical advice. We're talking about understanding tolerances, making sure everything is properly lubricated.
Because friction is the enemy.
You know it. And they also talk about something that people often overlook, corrosion.
Corrosion. I feel like that's something you worry about on a boat, not a factory floor.
You'd be surprised. I actually worked with this company a while back that had a major shutdown because a critical part seized up due to, you guessed it, corrosion. They hadn't factored in the humidity levels in their maintenance plan, and it ended up costing them a fortune in downtime. A little bit of preventative lubrication could have saved them a world of hurt.
Ouch. That's a painful lesson to learn.
Tell me about it. And that actually brings us to the third key area that the chapter highlights, empowering the operator. This is where TPM gets really interesting because it's not just about having the managers and engineers come up with solutions. It's about giving the people on the front lines, the ones who work with these machines day in and day out.
Ones who know those machines inside and out.
Exactly. It's about giving them a real sense of ownership.
So we're not just talking about operators fixing problems. We're talking about them preventing those problems in the first place.
You got it. They become the first line of defense. The chapter makes this great analogy, comparing traditional breakdown maintenance, waiting till something breaks to fix it, to waiting until you're doubled over in pain to finally see a doctor.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Preventative maintenance, on the other hand, is like those yearly checkups we all know we should be doing. But then there's the Holy Grail, predictive maintenance.
Predictive maintenance.
Yeah.
Now that sounds impressive.
Yeah.
Almost like fortune telling for machines.
Haha. Kind of. It's about using data and technology to basically predict potential problems before they even happen. Imagine if your car could tell you your brakes were getting worn down before they failed completely.
That would be pretty handy.
Right, that's the power of predictive maintenance. And the chapter actually gives some really cool examples of how companies are using things like sensors, data analysis, even artificial intelligence to move from being reactive to proactive with their maintenance.
So predictive maintenance, that's some next level stuff. But, getting back to those folks on the front lines, how do you empower operators to not only spot potential issues, but actually feel comfortable speaking up about them?
That's where the fourth and final key area comes in, implementation. And the chapter really hammers home that training is absolutely crucial and not just like a one-time thing. It's got to be ongoing. You want to build this culture of continuous learning where operators are always upskilling themselves, sharing knowledge with each other.
It's like teach a man to fish, but for keeping those machines humming.
Exactly. Love it. Okay, so you've got the training down, everyone's up to speed, but how do you make sure everyone's on the same page day in and day out on the factory floor?
Right, because things can get pretty hectic out there.
For sure. That's where visual management comes in. The chapter talks about how even small things like using color-coded labels, putting up clear signage, even strategically placing mirrors.
Mirrors.
Yep. It's all about making things easier to see and understand at a glance. Making the invisible visible.
I like that. So instead of relying on someone to remember to check something, you're creating a system where it's almost impossible to forget.
Exactly. It just becomes second nature. In fact, they gave this a great example in the chapter. This one factory was having a problem with operators using the wrong cleaning agents on different parts of the production line. Sound familiar?
Oh, I can see that happening. So how'd they solve it?
They just color-coded the cleaning bottles, A&D, the parts of the machines that they were supposed to be used on.
Yeah.
Simple, right? But it worked like a charm.
Elegant, even. I like it. It's funny. We started this whole deep dive talking about factories and machines and all that.
Yeah.
But the more we unpack these TPM principles, the more I realize how universal they are.
Ah, tell me about it.
I mean, who hasn't had that moment where they look at, like, a mountain of laundry or a stack of bills and think, ugh, if only I'd dealt with this sooner.
It's human nature, right, to put things off until later.
Exactly.
But that's the beauty of this whole TPM thing. It's really about creating systems that help us work smarter, not harder. And that applies whether you're running a factory, trying to keep your house in order, or just, managing your own little corner of the universe.
You said it. So if we were to distill this entire deep dive into one final actionable takeaway for our listeners, what would it be?
Well, the chapter ends by talking about how those small variations, over time, those little things we let slide, they can add up to some pretty big inefficiencies.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts, as they say.
Exactly. So I'd challenge our listeners to think about where in their own lives they could benefit from a little preventative maintenance, those small proactive steps they can take today to avoid those bigger headaches down the road.
Great advice. Love it. Little preventative maintenance goes a long way. Well, on that note, a huge thank you to you for joining me on this deep dive into the fascinating world of TPM. And to our listeners, until next time, stay curious and keep those metaphorical machines running smoothly.